The biggest imperial palace of ancient Rome, an ancient collection of travel souvenirs, an incredible day trip from Rome. What's this place? Hadrian's Villa.
Ciao everyone! Today we're going to explore Hadrian's Villa, which is just about an hour drive from Rome, so it's a perfect day trip from Rome. But what is Hadrian's Villa? Hadrian's Villa was the luxury villa of the Emperor Hadrian, who lived around the 2nd century AD. And this villa, you need to imagine, it was so luxury and so majestic that it is considered to be the Versailles Palace of ancient Rome. Imagine, it was even bigger than the Domus Aurea of Nero in the center of Rome. Are you ready to start exploring? Let's go!
The first thing you'll find when visiting Hadrian's Villa is this relief model, which shows you what the villa must have looked like originally. This relief model is a piece of history itself. It was made 70 years ago. But now let's talk about some numbers. The whole complex of this villa was about 120 hectares, which equals about 168 soccer fields. The area of the villa which has been excavated is about 60% of the total extension. The rest is still underground. This villa was literally just like a city. Hadrian didn't like the imperial residency in Rome. Too crowded, too chaotic. He spent very little time in Rome actually. He instead traveled a lot around the empire. His favorite places were Greece and Egypt. And what do you do when you really like a place you're visiting and you're going back home? You bring a souvenir, don't you? The souvenirs that Hadrian brought back, though, were not magnets, but buildings. Let's explain this a little better. Hadrian took inspiration from the places and buildings he saw around the world, and he would build similar buildings here in his villa in Tivoli. This was his house and his architectural hobby, and the biggest imperial palace of ancient Rome. As you understood by now, there's so much to see here. So now we're gonna show you some of our favorite highlights that you should see when visiting Hadrian's Villa. One of the most impressive souvenirs that Hadrian brought back home is this. This is called Canopus. This is a pool surrounded by columns and statues, and it was meant to remind Hadrian of one of his favorite places, Egypt. In particular of a canal in Egypt that from the Nile River connected the city of Alexandria to the town of Canopus. That's where the name comes from. Let's use a little bit of our imagination. You need to imagine that this pool was surrounded by statues, caryatids, columns, more than 100 meters long, which equals 300 feet. It must have been something incredible, and this is not even the best part, wait for it. The Canopus reminded Hadrian of his biggest love, Antino. Hadrian was married to a beautiful woman called Sabina, but he falls in love with one of the most beautiful boys called Antino. He met him during his travels and then soon he became his companion. Unfortunately though, Antino died in the Nile. No one knows exactly what happened, maybe an accident, some say he gave away his life to save Hadrian's life, maybe it was a homicide, we don't know. But what we know for sure is that Hadrian was heartbroken for the loss of Antino, and he made endless amounts of statues with his face. In fact, still today, if you go to museums and see ancient Roman statues, good chances are you will find at least one Antino statue in the collection. And also the Nile River reminded Hadrian of Antino, and so he made a reproduction of this river right in his villa. But what was this pool used for? You need to imagine that Hadrian would organize banquets around this very pool. You need to imagine that the guests of the banquets would lay on their banquet beds around the pool. And where was the Emperor Hadrian sitting? In the Serapeum, over there. We can find the Serapeum at the end of the Canopus. If the Canopus represented the Nile River, the Serapeum represented the temple of Serapis in the town of Canopus in Egypt. But how do we know this was an area dedicated to banquets? We know that thanks to this platform, which is slightly sloped, you see? Imagine this covered with mattresses, silk and other luxury materials. This is where the banquet guests would lay down. But now let's have a look at the specific place where Hadrian was actually standing during his banquet. First of all, inside you can see this little room. This was one of the toilets for the guests of the banquets. And this is where Hadrian was actually having his banquet, in this little room. Imagine everything surrounded by colorful marble statues and water flowing through, and from here he had a spectacular view of the Canopus, of the whole pool, and all his guests laying around it and enjoying the banquet. And to make things even more special and spectacular, Hadrian included a curtain of water falling right from there. So this will work as a curtain that will open and close at the beginning, at the end of the banquet, just to make things even more spectacular. Imagine being a guest invited to one of these banquets. But now let's continue our exploration in Hadrian's villa. This wasn't just a private residency, quite the opposite actually. Hadrian transferred here a lot of governative function. He actually signed a lot of documents here. And this is where he also gathered a lot of his counselors and hundreds of noble Roman people, senators. They all came to meet Hadrian here. Therefore, he needed to entertain and surprise them all the time so that he could have their support and respect. And that is why Hadrian's villa featured a lot of spaces for banquets, both indoors and outdoors, stadiums for athletic games, for gladiator fights, theaters, and also thermal baths. More than a villa, this was actually a small city. Today you can only see raw walls for the most part, but if you take a closer look, you can still find details that help your imagination picture how amazing these rooms were. Rooms of any shape, of any size, and so many colors. Incredibly tall ceilings, marble revetment all over, colorful mosaic, shiny marble floors, water fountains, and pools that reflected against the shiny walls. A place that will make your head spin and drop your jaw. A little curiosity, this room is believed to be one of the private bedrooms of the emperor. This was meant for double occupancy and it had 2 beds. Not only 2 beds, but also 2 toilets. Look at this. There was one here and another one on the other side of the same room. Imagine in ancient Rome, almost nobody had toilets at home, and here we have 2 for 1 bedroom. All in all, what Hadrian wanted when designing his villa was to continuously amaze his guests. The idea was to turn a corner, any corner, and find yourself in front of an amazing view all the time. There were no actual paths. There wasn't like a straight corridor with a nice view at the end. Everything was a surprise, an unexpected surprise behind every single corner. And a place where you can really leave this effect that Hadrian wanted is this. This is where you turn the corner, you walk down some steps, and all of a sudden you find yourself in front of this. This is one of the highlights of Hadrian's villa, and actually our favorite place. This is the Maritime Theater. This is where Hadrian built a villa within a villa. This was a place to escape within his own villa, where he would escape maybe with Antinos. This is the Maritime Theater, a little sophisticated house on an artificial island. There were drawbridges that Hadrian would move away when he didn't want to be disturbed on the island. And now we're exceptionally able to walk inside today to show you how amazing this place was. This is the
Most private wing of the Hadrian's villa, where Hadrian used to come here when he wanted to be totally alone. So now let's cross the bridge and let's see what's on the other side. Now we're entering into the private house of Hadrian. This used to be an outdoor space, so there was no ceiling in this area. This was a sort of Hadrian, the atrium, where you have the columns and the open ceiling, something that you will find in most of the Roman domus, the Roman houses, an open ceiling, so then when it rains, the rain will fall into this little pool in the middle. And then here we have the so-called tablinum, which was a sort of office for the landlord, for the owner of the house. And next to the tablinum, we will have a couple of rooms, 1 and 2. If we come and see this room, it would be in something like a bedroom. You can see this curved shape again, everything is curved. And this room had also a private toilet. Look at this. This was the private toilet of the guest of this room. After the bedroom and the toilet, of course, Hadrian also thought of a thermal bath. This was the frigidarium, this was the cold room. And this cold room has this pool, and this pool had direct access to the water outside. So you can see the steps over there, that's where you would basically climb the stairs and swim in the swimming pool right around this island. And as every thermal bath in ancient Rome, not only you have the cold room, but also the warm room. And this used to be a warm room. So this was the warm room, and what did it look like? This wasn't the floor. This was there was an elevated floor with bricks stacked one on top of each other, and then the hot air would flow through to warm the room from the floor heating. How did they warm this up? With an oven. That's where the fire was burning. So this was basically where the oven was, where the fire was, and they would then heat up the whole room.
And these were our favorite highlights of Hadrian's Villa that we think you shouldn't miss. Let us know in the comments what was your favorite part and how you're planning to come and visit this place. Thanks for watching and ciao!